أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صلوات. Being a Thursday night majlis, I would like to take this opportunity to talk about something I have mentioned about this even before, but in a more comprehensive manner. I would like to revisit this issue that we, in our calendars, we observe all different kinds of events when it comes to shahadat, wafayat, and the wiladat of the holy figures. And sometimes, it comes to light for us here in the western part of the world that, so-and-so community is observing this event in this date, but in our calendar it says something else. And people start getting, nervous, anxiety. I get calls, I get emails from ordinary members to the even senior people of the community. And this is where, I thought maybe it's important to realize our own, space and time, and how these things, in a way evolve. First of all, we have to realize that, till lately, when I say lately, means just before 40 years ago, before 50 years ago, the world was not that much interconnected. People didn't know about other communities or other nations. There was no fast means of communication that if something happens here, people in other part of the world know about it within minutes, not in hours. And something happens in the East, we call up the people in their city. They said, we still don't know about it, but we already seen that on the in the TV news about it. And so during those days when there were no means of communications in that way, people were in a way confined mostly to their own geographical areas, and in most cases they would actually only interact with the people of their own ethno-cultural, communities. Somebody in Kandahar, for example, a Shia, lives there, dies there, 50, 60 years, never seen any Shia from any other background. And they had been doing things like that. Somebody in Hyderabad, 50, 100 years ago, they lived in their own confines. They didn't see Shias from other areas. The Khojas living in East Africa, 50 years ago, they interacted with themselves. They had their own ways of doing things. Similarly, the Iranians, or you go to Bahrain, or you go to Iraq, or Lebanon. So people were basically, spoke their own language, interacted with their own people. And, there was not much concern about what's going on in the other part of the world, in the country, other cultures, because everybody did, same thing in their own areas. However, you have to realize that, when it comes to the issue of, those days there was not much concern about the diversity or difference of opinion among ulama on historical events. You lived in your own culture, in your own society, you thought this is the gospel truth. There is nothing else. This is what it is. Because you didn't know anything else. Now what happens is, this is where we have to realize that the differences were only known to the learned, the scholars, and the ulama. The differences in the tarikh, in the dates of the events in our history is nothing new. This has been there from early days. After the early, era of Ghaibat-e Sughra, you have the days of Sheikh Saduq, Kulaini, Mufid. From those days, you would see that the differences are there. Pick up, Usul al-Kafi and Kitab al-Irshad of Sheikh Mufid. Those section dealing with the birth and wafat of the Masumeen in Usul al-Kafi, there is a section there. And look at the Kitab al-Irshad, which is a book of history written by Sheikh Mufid. Even there you will see that on this, event, this is my preference, but there are other, opinions also on the same shahadat or wiladat. And this is where we see that, when people were confined to their own areas, this was not an issue because you didn't know really much about others. But then what has happened? Now you have people from India and Pakistan migrating to the West. People from Afghanistan and Iran coming to the West. People from Iraq and Lebanon coming to the West. And so now look at Toronto. MashaAllah, we have almost 15 Shia centers, if not more, big and small. Of all ethnic backgrounds, from Urdu speaking to the Gujarati and English speaking, to Afghans, Iranians, Iraqi, Lebanese, all these ethnic Shia groups have their own centers. Now that we come all in the one city, this is where we come to realize, okay, we observe this event on this day. And the other center has the same event but at a different date. Or there is more interaction between, our own people traveling for ziyarat and going more frequently to Iran and Iraq, and you hear things differently from what you have been doing in your own centers or in your own cultural confines. And this is where, you have to realize that there is diversity of how to observe the religious events in different diverse communities as far as their language and culture and location is concerned. I'll just give you one example. The Wiladat of the fourth Imam. When do we do that? 5th Shaban. In India, that's not it. That's 15th Jamad al-Awwal. Okay? Shahadat of the fourth Imam. India and here also in our centers we do it on the 25th of Muharram. In Iran it's observed on the 12th of Muharram. The wafat of the sixth Imam. In Iran it's on 25th of Shawwal, which also is there in our Jamaat calendar here. In India, it is observed on the 15th of Shawwal. That's why you will see, for example, other centers, Urdu-speaking centers, have on the 15th of Shawwal, whereas our center does it on 25th of Shawwal. When it comes to the Shahadat of the 8th Imam, in Iran, it is 29th or 30th of end of Safar, whereas in India, it's 18th of Safar. For example, when I go for the Arba'in Majalis, I make sure, okay, 18th Safar, are you doing, Shahadat of the 8th Imam or not? So that I can, prepare accordingly. But other centers, we don't do it. We do it towards the end of the month of Safar. When it comes to even the wafat of Bibi Zainab, I'll come to that later on. In Iran, it's done on the 15th of Rajab. In South India, it's done on the 24th of Safar. Now, the reason I'm saying South India, because sometimes even in India, in North India, Lucknow, they have a different date, and in Hyderabad, in South, they have different date. Although it's the same country. especially when it comes to the issue of the shahadat of Bibi Fatima Zahra salawatullah alayha. Historically, there are two dates. In Iran and North India, it's the 3rd of Jamadi al-Thani, which is also observed in our calendar. Whereas in South India, it's the 13th of Jamadi al-Ula in Hyderabad. So now you have people from the same country, from North India and South India coming together in New Jersey or Toronto or Los Angeles or somewhere else, and then you see that, okay, is it this or this one? What do we do? And this is where we have to realize that, there has to be some understanding and some sense of tolerance on this issue. There is no need to fight on this issue or put one or the other down. It's not that. It actually all goes back to the issue of what is there in our sources. For example, when it comes to this issue of the shahadat of Bibi Fatima Zahra salawatullah alayha, we actually have the hadith from the Ma'soom about it. And you will say, if we have the hadith from the Ma'soom, then why there is a dispute? The hadith is there, which says, وَفَاطِمَةَ مَكَسَتْ بَعْدَ وَفَاةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, so many number of days. That Fatima lived after the wafat of the Prophet for a number of days. Now that number of days, when you look at the earlier manuscripts of books like Usul Kafi, the first compilation of the hadith of the Shias, those days it was actually written in Kufi script. There was no nuqta, no dots. And when there are not dots, sometimes you have same word can be read in two different ways. Now we have all these new versions of it, with nuqtas and everything. Without that, we cannot. But if you look at this slide, look at the first one. What does it say? Khamsa wa? How do you say sab'in? Does it have nuqtas there? No, it doesn't have nuqtas there. Look at the second line. Now it says khamsa wa sab'in. Same word there. Look at the third slide now. You're only changing the nuqtas. Now it's becoming khamsa wa tis'een. So it's the same wording from Ma'soom. However, because of the lack of nuqta, some people read it as 75 days after wafat of Rasulullah, and some people read it tis'een, 95 days after wafat of Rasulullah. This is where you are getting these two different dates. Either 3rd of Jamadi al-Thani or the 13th of Jamadi al-Ula. You go and count it, you'll see 75 or 95. And so the problem is not only the issue of, whether the narration is different. Sometimes even the way ahadith were read, because of the lack of nuqta, this is where the differences comes in. And this is where we have to realize that we have, now of course, Hawza Ilmiya Qum from very early days, and even Najaf, I'm talking about 70s, used to observe both dates. The 75 days after wafat of Rasulullah and 95 days after wafat of Rasulullah. And after the mid-90s, when this controversy started, doubting the suffering of Bibi Fatima Zahra, this became a more strong issue, that it was not only confined now to Hawza, the Shia community almost on a global level now observes the Shahadat of Bibi on both two occasions. And this is where I would like to emphasize this point. Have tolerance if you see differences that, the Iranians are doing this, Iraqis are doing this, Afghans are observed, we are, well, everybody is Shia. It's not somebody is lesser and other is greater. Unfortunately, among our own people from South Asian background, there is a tendency, if it's Irani bolta hai to sahi hai. Yeah, Iraqi bolta hai to sahi hai. As if, Desi people don't have any value at all. Whereas, this is an issue of ilm and knowledge. It's nothing to do with ethnicity or location. And so respect one another and don't have these, necessary conflicts on this issue if it is being observed, because many of these events are not that clearly mentioned, or there is diversity, even the historical sources that we have from our own, early ulama. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. I'll give you one example of from the life of my own late father, Allama Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi, may Allah, elevate his status. Those of you know him, you know him. He was very an alim of a great status, even seen, highly respected by the Maraji also during his time. First time he was invited from India to Africa. This is in 1959. This is 2 years after I was born. So you can know my age now, at least. Anyway. So, first time he travels outside India. And we come from North Indian part. Those days, in the books, in North India, the tradition was that Bibi Zainab's wafat was, first of all, in the North India, during those days, there were no majlis organized for the wafat of Bibi Zainab. No, not everywhere. In South, in India, the 24th Safar was considered to be the day of wafat. Whether you have a majlis or not, but at least in the books they would write in Tuhfat al-Awam, for example, something equivalent to Mafati in Urdu. But when it comes to Iran, it was on 15th of Rajab. What do you have the date for the wafat of Bibi Zainab in the calendar of the Jamaat comes from the calendars in East Africa. And that is based on what was commonly used in Iran those days. My father travels from Bombay by ship after almost, 2 weeks journey. He landed in Dar es Salaam where he was invited. The day he lands there, coming to a new country, we are from North India, Urdu is the main language. He was not that much familiar with the Gujarati culture. He understood the language, but he didn't live in Gujarat area of India. He lands there after traveling for 2 weeks. As soon as he gets off the ship on the port there, the Mukhi Sahib of Dar es Salaam Jamaat says, Maulana, aaj Bibi Zainab ki majlis hai. Now, this is where we have to realize that it was actually the way it was observed by the calendar there. It's not the wafat of Bibi Zainab. It was the Wiladat event of Bibi Zainab, according to their calendar. Now there is language problem is there. In Urdu, when you say majlis, it is for aza. It is for wafat or shahadat. Wiladat, you say mahfil. So in Urdu culture, there is a difference between mahfil and majlis. Now he is told that Maulana aaj Bibi Zainab ki majlis hai. Doesn't know anything about the culture of the Khojas, or the calendar he hasn't seen, he's just learning now. He goes on the minbar, and after his topic, whatever it was, at the end, ends with the Masayib of Bibi Zainab. Whereas it's supposed to be the Wiladat of Bibi Zainab. You can realize what was the first impression. He was supposed to come to Dar es Salaam, but somehow, of course, there was some politics going on. It's nothing new. It has been there all the time. He ended up going to another city in the south of Tanganyika those days. And it was only later on they realized that they have lost somebody who has, great qualities. Then they started asking him to come back. It took them 5 years to get him back to Dar es Salaam. And my point is that somebody didn't know, coming from India, but didn't know the culture of the Gujarati Khoja Shia Isna Asharis. And there you have this kind of an incident, which I even written in the biography of my father, just to show this difference in the cultural, what sometimes it does. And this is where we have to realize that, we have to have open mind, and there should be no, tussle on this issue. Oh, so-and-so is doing this way. Senior ulama have said that. No, sometimes, events are just, in a way, even invented these days, unfortunately. I'll tell you. These days, there are some centers, you will see, they are even coming up with the Wiladat Day of Janabi Ali Asghar. There's no historical, narration about that anywhere. No hadith, no historical record in our sources. What they have done? They say, 10th of Ashura, Muharram. So 6 months old, so they go 6 months back, and they say, so this is the day of Wiladat of Ali Asghar. But when we say Shishmahe or 6 month, it doesn't mean on the day of Ashura it was 6 months to the day. It's just a saying that he was a infant, shirkhar bacha. You don't use that the expression to go back 6 months back and say that, okay, this was the day when he was born. But now, people have that, and gradually it will become part of their calendar. And after, then we'll get emails. Maulana, why don't we have this event in our calendar? Well, let things be the way they are. We don't really have to fight about it and be, go into anxiety that what's going on. Inshallah, we have to respect, and Ahlul Bayt are, the source of happiness and joy for us. And we also commemorate any event which is referred to their tragedy and their suffering. Salawat. I think a real challenge is actually when we talk about the wafat of the shahadat of this second Imam, Imam Hassan Mujtaba alayhi salatu wasalam. That is observed in certain circles on the 7th of Safar. Now, the twist there is that according to a confirmed report that we have in our books, 7th of Safar is also the Wiladat day of the 7th Imam. So what do? The same day, Shahadat of Imam Hassan Mujtaba and Wiladat of the 7th Imam. And this is where we have to realize that, when you have celebration and commemoration, sad event and a happy occasion, there, of course, the tragedy will supersede. During our own time, the Maraji of Qum were asked about this issue. What do we do? Because Shia is not as a religious requirement, but culturally and emotionally and spiritually, we don't have any celebration during Muharram and Safar. And this is across the board as far as the Shias are concerned. And so the Maharaja were asked, what do we do? on that day. And the response given by people like, and this is a question which was sent to by some individuals in Iran those days, to the Grand Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani, as well as the marhum who passed away recently, a few months ago, Ayatollah Lutfullah Safi, Ayatollah Sadiq Rouhani, Ayatollah Shubairi Zinjani, as well as marhum Ayatollah Jawad Tabrizi, and Aghay Bahjat, and marhum Fazl Lankarani. And all of them said that when you have a wafat and a wiladat coming on the same day, the wafat will supersede as far as observation is concerned. However, the late Ayatollah Bahjat actually reflected his ihtiyat and precaution on this issue. And he gave a very, wise, advice on that. He said on 7th of Safar, recite the fazail of the 7th Imam and the masaib of the 2nd Imam. So you'll be in a way, combining both events. Now in our calendar we don't have, that's why we don't have the day for the wiladat of the 7th Imam. Somebody in East Africa in the old days came up with a, their own ingenious ways of doing things. He said, well, it's the 7th Imam, and the 7th month is the month of Rajab. So why don't we take the 7th day of Rajab as a day of celebrating the wiladat of Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam. 7th month, 7th day, 7th Imam. Now, it was an interesting idea. But the reason I in a way don't want that to be on the calendar, because when you put that in the calendar, for the next generation and the generation later on, they will say, there must be a narration about it. And this will become something like a confirmed statement. And so whatever we do here, remember that it's not only what we are doing, this will be looked back by 2-3 generations. And they will say, it was been done, and it was even printed in the calendars. It means there must have been a narration for the 7th Imam. No. And so, let's have an open mind on this issue. There's no need to, argue on these issues. If there is diversity in the Shia community on a cultural, ethnic background, this is because of the difference of opinion in the historical sources. And, you had to tolerate that. After all, you live in a multicultural society. We need to have that sense of, respecting the cultures of one another within the broader Shia community. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. The main thing is that, the events related to the A'imma of Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet and Bibi Fatima, they should be the standard for us. We talked about this issue of the 7th Safar, being the Shahadat of Imam Hassan Mushtaba or the Wiladat of Imam Musa Kazim. We said that, according to the Maraji, the Shahadat prevails on it. Put that on a personal level. If there is a conflict there, we have a confirmed, said event in our calendar related to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And then there is my own birthday on that day. That's where the test comes in. Or the birthday of your children, or your grandchildren. You have to now inculcate these values. That if there is a conflict between the tragedies and suffering of the Ahlul Bayt, as opposed to your own celebrations, you will have to let it go. Observe it later on. Delay it, or do it before. But you can't do it on that same day. Even when it comes to some of the national celebration and cultural events, this is where we'll have to see. Unfortunately, in some communities, they don't really respect it in that way. And this is where we have to realize that the Shias are known. The Imams actually have emphasized, Shi'atuna yafrahuna bifharhina wa yahdununa bihudnina. Our Shias are those who are happy with our happiness, and they are sad with our suffering and tragedies. That should be the criteria. Otherwise, if you look at the situation, if we don't teach that, and especially when it comes to the 10 to 12 days of the Muharram, those are very important events where we don't do anything as far as happy events in our life is concerned. Alhamdulillah, when it comes to the wedding, people are very cognizant of that. They take care of this issue that it shouldn't be coinciding with the wafat or the shahadat of the imam or days related to them. But even in other occasions, we have to keep this in mind so that and that is the whole test, where our feelings, our like and dislike should be subservient to the like and dislike of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. Salawat padhne ke बाद یہ جو ہم نے آپ کے سامنے مثال پیش کی ہے، یہ اس لیے تھی کہ تاکہ اندازہ ہو کہ تھوڑا کلچرلی کبھی کبھی ہم لوگوں کے یہاں یہ ہوتا ہے کہ ہم لوگ اپنے کو سپیریئر سمجھتے ہیں کمپیئر ٹو ادرس who observe events differently. نہیں، اس میں کوئی افضل اور مفضول کی بات نہیں ہے، بیٹر اور لیسر کی بات نہیں ہے. لوگ جو ہیں اپنے معلومات کے لحاظ سے، اپنے تہذیب اور ثقافت کے لحاظ سے، اپنے معلومات کے لحاظ سے جو ہے وہ ان واقعات اور مناسبات کو برگزار کرتے ہیں، چاہے وہ ولادت کی بات ہو یا ائمہ کی وفات کی بات ہو. اصل یہی ہے کہ ہمیں اپنے ذاتی غم کو اہل بیت کے غم سے ملا دینا ہے، اور اپنی ذاتی خوشی کو ہم قربان کریں گے اہل بیت کے غم کی خاطر. اور یہ اسپیشلی بہت اہم ہے نیکسٹ جنریشن کے لیے. آج کی بات نہیں ہے، آج سے 10 سال 12 سال پہلے کی بات ہے. ایک مولانا یو ایس میں رہتے ہیں، انہوں نے ہمیں ایک واقعہ بتایا کہ ایک بار ان کے سامنے پیرنٹس آئے اپنی جوان بیٹی کو لے کے. کیا بات ہے بھائی؟ وہ جھگڑا ہو رہا ہے بٹوین پیرنٹس اینڈ دی ڈاٹر. جھگڑا کس بات پہ ہے؟ محرم کے عشرے کی بات ہے، عشرے اولا. اتفاق سے وہ بیٹی کے پروم نائٹ جو ہے اسی میں پڑ رہی تھی. اولاً پروم نائٹ میں جانا ہی کوشچنیبل ہے، ٹھیک ہے. اس کو اصرار تھا. مولانا صاحب کے سامنے جھگڑا ہو رہا ہے بیٹی میں اور ماں باپ میں. ماں باپ اب تھک ہار کے مولانا کے سامنے لے آئے ہیں. وہاں جو سبق ہے ہمارے لیے، عبرت کا مقام ہے، جو واقعاً ہمیں اپنے بچوں کے لیے، نیکسٹ جنریشن کے لیے سوچنا چاہیے کہ وہاں پر مولانا کے سامنے وہ لڑکی اپنے ماں باپ سے ایک جملہ کہتی ہے کہ یور عاشورہ کمز ایوری ایئر، مائی پروم نائٹ کمز ونس ان اے لائف ٹائم. یہ جو عنوان ہے نا، یور اینڈ مائی، شوز کہ وہ جنریشن گیپ کی جو بات ہم کرتے ہیں نا، آپ نے اپنا عاشورہ اپنا ہی رکھا ہے، اپنے بچوں کے دل و دماغ میں نہیں ڈالا ہے کہ یہ تمہارا بھی عاشورہ ہے. اگر وہ بچپنے سے سکھائے ہوتے تو آج وہ جملہ نہ بولتی. یہ جملہ بہت ہی سخت ہے. سوچیے آپ کہ وہ بیٹی ماں باپ سے کہے کہ یور عاشورہ، اس سے زیادہ مصیبت انسان کے لیے کچھ اور نہیں ہو سکتی ہے کہ ہم نے عزاداری کی، خود ہم بیزی رہے اس میں، پابندی سے جاتے تھے لیکن بچوں کا خیال نہیں کیا. ہم مغم ہمارے تھا کہ بھائی اچھے سے اچھی ڈگری لے تاکہ اس کی زندگی بن سکے, اچھی نوکری ملے. یہ ہم بھول گئے کہ بیچ میں کیا ہو گیا. وہ عاشورہ صرف ہمارے ہی رہا, ہماری اولاد تک منتقل نہیں ہوا. اور اس میں جو ہے خود ہمارے لیے قیامت کے دن جو ہے سوال ہوگا اس سلسلے میں کہ جب آپ اس ماحول میں لے کے آئے ہیں اپنے بچوں کو, تو آپ کی ذمہ داری تھی کہ اپنے ویلیوز کو آپ بعد والی جنریشن میں منتقل کریں. ہمارے یہاں یہ جنریشن گیپ کی بات نہیں ہوتی ہے. امام حسین علیہ السلام کا قافلہ جب جا رہا تھا کربلا کی طرف, اس میں آپ دیکھیں ایک وہ مرحلہ واقعہ آپ سنتے رہتے ہیں, بہت ہی مشہور ہے, لہٰذا ہمیں ڈیٹیلز بیان نہیں کرنی ہے. ایک مرحلہ آتا ہے کہ امام جو ہے گھوڑے پہ ہیں, آگے آگے سواری چل رہی ہے, اور عالم رویا میں دیکھتے ہیں, ویژن دیکھتے ہیں کہ کوئی آواز دے رہا ہے کہ یہ قافلہ موت کی طرف جا رہا ہے اور موت اس کی طرف آ رہی ہے. امام کو افاقہ ہوتا ہے, فوراً زبان پہ جملہ آتا ہے, اِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ راجعون. علی اکبر کچھ قدم پیچھے چل رہے تھے, احترام, باپ کے احترام میں, ساتھ ساتھ سواری نہیں تھی. گھوڑے کو آگے بڑھاتے ہیں, بابا کے برابر, پوچھتے ہیں بابا یہ کلمہ برحق ہے, اِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ راجعون. لیکن یہ موقع محل کیا تھا؟ اس وقت امام نے کہا کہ ہم نے عالم رویا میں دیکھا کوئی آواز دے رہا ہے اس طرح سے. جوان بیٹے نے صرف ایک سوال کیا, یا ابتا السنا علی الحق, کیا بابا ہم حق پہ نہیں ہیں؟ اور اس وقت حسین جواب دیتے ہیں کہ یقیناً ہم حق پہ ہیں. اس کے بعد اکبر نے ایک عجیب جملہ کہا ہے کہ بابا ہمیں اس کی پرواہ نہیں ہے کہ ہم موت کی طرف جائیں یا موت ہماری طرف آئے. یہ جملہ ایکچولی علی اکبر نے کہا ہے, لیکن یہ وہ جملہ ہے جو علی کا تھا. امیر المومنین کا ایک جملہ ہے, کئی مواقع پہ امام بولتے ہیں کہ علی ابن ابی طالب کو اس کی پرواہ نہیں ہے کہ وہ موت کی طرف جائے یا موت اس کی طرف آئے. وہاں آپ دیکھیں گے کہ دادا کی بات اور پوتے کی بات میں کوئی فرق نہیں ہے. وہ جنریشن گیپ کی جو بات ہم کرتے ہیں وہ وہاں اہل بیت کے مکتب میں نہیں ہے. یہ دیکھا نہیں ہے, علی اکبر نے اپنے دادا کو کبھی نہیں دیکھا ہے, ان کی ولادت بعد میں ہوئی ہے, لیکن جو ہے وہ ویلیوز چل رہے ہیں فرام ون جنریشن ٹو اندر. اور اسی لیے آپ دیکھیں کہ امام حسین ابن علی کے لیے سب سے مشکل امتحان عاشور کے دن اسی وقت تھا جب اکبر آئے ہیں اجازت طلب کرنے کے لیے. کتنا مشکل تھا. اجازت دیتے ہیں جس کیفیت سے, ایک مقابلہ بھی ہوتا ہے, جیت کے آتے ہیں. امام حسین علیہ السلام اس وقت بھی عاشور کے دن ہر مرحلہ مشکل تھا, لیکن وہ مواقع جس کو ہم کاؤنٹ کریں گے کہ جو مشکل ترین میں سے جو لسٹ ہوگی, شارٹ لسٹ کریں گے, وہ مرحلہ تھا کہ جوان بیٹا آتا ہے اور بزرگ باپ سے کہتا ہے, یا ابتا العطش قد قتلنی وثقل الحدید اجہدنی. بابا پیاس نے مجھے قتل کر دیا, اسلحے کی سنگینی نے مجھے تھکا دیا ہے. کیا کوئی سبیل ہے کہ ایک پانی کا ایک قطرہ مل سکے؟ حسین ابن علی کے لیے سب سے امتحانی مرحلہ اسی وقت کا تھا. یہ وہ ہے جو صاحب ولایت تکوینی ہے. اگر حکم دیتے تو علقمہ اپنے رخ کو موڑ کے وہ خیمے تک آ سکتے, لیکن حسین جانتے تھے یہ میرا ذاتی امتحان ہے. اپنی زبان دے دیتے ہیں. اکثر جوان پوچھتے ہیں کہ آخر یہ کیا ہے, یہ تو عجیب و غریب بات ہے. نہیں, حسین کس طرح سے سمجھاتے اکبر کو کہ بیٹا باپ تو تم سے زیادہ پیاسا ہے. اس لیے کہ عاشور کے دن اگر سب سے زیادہ پیاسا بندہ تھا تو وہ حسین ابن علی تھا. امام کو معلوم تھا پانی کب بند ہوگا. حسین نے پانی کا استعمال کم کر دیا تھا بہت پہلے سے.
اور اکبر کو احساس ہوا چلے جاتے ہیں. لیکن آپ دیکھ لیں اخلاق کا مظاہرہ دیکھیں آپ کہ جب اکبر کو برچھی لگی ہے اور گھوڑے سے زمین پہ آتے ہیں، اس عالم میں جو آواز دی ہے بابا کو عجیب و غریب ہے. ہر شہید نے امام کو پکارا تھا مدد کے لیے انکلوڈنگ جناب عباس، لیکن اکبر نے بابا کو پکارا نہیں ہے، صرف یہ کہا تھا کہ بابا آپ پر سلام ہو، میرے جد آ چکے ہیں، انہوں نے سیراب کر دیا ہے. یہ جملہ اس لیے کہا تھا کہ حسین نے کہا تھا بیٹا جاؤ، تیرے جد آ چکے ہیں، پانی کا کاسا لیے ہوئے تیرے انتظار میں ہیں. اکبر جانتے تھے کہ میں نے جب یہ سوال کیا ہے بابا سے، بابا کا دل بڑا غمگین ہے، بابا کے غم کو ختم کرنے کے لیے یہ جملہ کہتے ہیں کہ بابا آپ غم نہ کرو، آپ کا بیٹا اب پیاسا نہیں رہا. الا لعنۃ اللہ علی القوم الظالمین سیعلم الذین ظلموا ای منقلب ینقلبون. خداوند اس کے لیے بار قبول فرما، ہمارے گناہوں کو بخش دے، ہمارے توفیقات میں اضافہ فرما. خداوندہ شیعان علی جہاں بھی اپنے حفظ و امان میں رکھ، انہیں توفیق دے کہ صحیح معنوں میں اہل بیت کے ویلیوز اور تعلیمات کو بعد والی نسل تک منتقل کر سکیں. امام کے ظہور میں تاجل فرما. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.